At my sister's promotion party, they popped champagne, gifted her a Cartier watch, and called her the family star. I was handed a trash bag and asked to collect bottles. Then she laughed and said, "Maybe one day you'll get a real job too." I just checked my watch and announced, "I earned $200,000 last year from my freelancing business." Her reaction was priceless. I, 32M, never thought a family celebration would turn into the moment I finally stood up for myself. But here we are. My sister had just gotten promoted to senior marketing manager at some corporate firm, and my parents decided to throw her a party at their house. The whole extended family was there: aunts, uncles, cousins, even some of her work colleagues. Everyone was dressed up, champagne bottles lined the kitchen counter, and there was this whole fancy spread of catered food. I showed up in jeans and a button-down. Nothing too formal, but respectable enough for a family gathering. The moment I walked in, I could feel the familiar weight of expectations, or rather, the lack of them. My mother barely acknowledged me with a quick hug before rushing back to fuss over the decorations. My father gave me that look, the one that said he was disappointed but not surprised that I wasn't dressed better. The party was in full swing when the gift-giving started. My parents called everyone to gather in the living room, and my sister stood there beaming as they handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a Cartier watch, the kind that costs more than most people's monthly rent. Everyone oohed and awed as she put it on, the gold catching the light perfectly. My father cleared his throat and launched into this speech about how proud they were of her achievements, how she was climbing the corporate ladder with such grace and determination. He called her the family star, the one who had really made something of herself. The room erupted in applause, and my sister soaked it all in with this satisfied smile. Meanwhile, I stood in the back, nursing a beer and trying to blend into the wallpaper. Nobody asked me about my work or my life. Nobody seemed particularly interested in having a conversation with me at all. I was used to it by now, the invisible son, the one who never quite measured up to family expectations. As the evening wore on, people started getting louder and messier. Empty bottles accumulated on every surface, plastic cups scattered across the coffee table, and someone had spilled red wine on the white tablecloth. That's when my mother spotted me standing near the kitchen. She walked over with this expectant look and handed me a large black trash bag. She told me it would be really helpful if I could go around and collect all the empty bottles and clean up a bit. Not asked, told. Like it was just assumed that this was my role at the party. I looked around the room at all the other family members, none of whom were being handed cleaning supplies. My cousins were deep in conversation about their jobs and relationships. My uncles were debating sports. My aunts were complimenting my sister on her success. And here I was, being designated as the cleanup crew. I took the bag without saying anything and started making my rounds. Picking up empty champagne bottles, tossing plastic cups, wiping down surfaces. A few people thanked me distractedly, but most didn't even notice. I was just part of the background, the guy who handles the mess so everyone else can keep celebrating. As I was collecting bottles from the living room, I overheard my sister talking to one of her colleagues. She was gesturing toward me with her champagne flute, and I caught the tail end of her conversation. She was explaining how her brother, me, was still trying to figure out his career path, doing some freelance work here and there, but nothing really substantial. Her colleague made some polite noise about everyone finding their way eventually, but my sister just shrugged. She said maybe someday I'd get a real job too, with that condescending tone she perfected over the years. Then she laughed, this light, dismissive sound that somehow managed to cut deeper than any direct insult. I stopped collecting bottles. The trash bag crinkled in my hands as I stood there, processing what I'd just heard. This wasn't new. My family had been treating my freelance work as a hobby for years. But hearing it said so casually, so publicly, at a party where everyone was celebrating real success, something inside me finally snapped. I checked my watch. Not a Cartier, just a simple Seiko I'd bought myself, and realized I was done being invisible. I was done being the family disappointment who quietly cleans up while everyone else gets celebrated. I walked over to where my sister was holding court, her new watch glinting as she gestured. The conversation died as I approached, and suddenly I had everyone's attention in a way I hadn't all evening. I announced, loud enough for the whole room to hear, that I'd earned $200,000 last year from my freelancing business. The number hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. The reaction was immediate and electric. My sister's champagne flute stopped halfway to her lips. Her colleague's eyebrows shot up. Conversations across the room stuttered to a halt as people turned to look at us. My sister's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, something that might have been panic. She asked if I was joking, and I told her I wasn't. I explained that my hobby of freelance web development and digital marketing consultation had grown into something pretty substantial over the past 3 years. The room had gone completely quiet now. My parents appeared at my sister's side, looking bewildered. My father asked why I'd never mentioned this before, and I told him honestly, because nobody had ever asked. Every family gathering, every phone call, every conversation somehow managed to avoid the topic of my actual success. My sister tried to recover, saying she had no idea and that I should have said something sooner. But her voice had lost that confident edge from earlier. The colleague she'd been impressing was now asking me detailed questions about my business model and client base. I found myself explaining my work to an actually interested audience for the first time in years. How I'd started with small local businesses and gradually built up to working with major corporations. How I developed specialized skills in e-commerce optimization that were in high demand. How I'd been booked solid for months and had to start turning down clients. My mother, who had handed me the trash bag an hour earlier, now wanted to know all the details about my income and my business plan. My father, who had barely acknowledged me when I arrived, was suddenly full of questions about my investment strategy and tax situation. But it was my sister's reaction that I'll remember forever. She stood there with her expensive new watch and her promotion celebration, looking like someone had just told her that everything she thought she knew about the world was wrong. The family star, suddenly realizing that the invisible brother had been quietly out-earning her corporate salary while she was busy dismissing his work as amateur hour. Her colleague congratulated me and mentioned that their company was actually looking for someone with my exact skill set. We exchanged business cards right there in my parents' living room, while my sister watched with this frozen smile that didn't reach her eyes. The party continued, but the dynamic had shifted completely. People who had been ignoring me all evening suddenly wanted to chat. Cousins who hadn't asked about my life in years were now curious about my business plans. The same relatives who had been praising my sister's corporate success were now asking me for advice about their own side hustles. My sister tried to reclaim the spotlight several times throughout the rest of the evening, but something had fundamentally changed. The story of the night wasn't her promotion anymore. It was the quiet revelation that had turned everyone's assumptions upside down. As the party wound down and people started leaving, my sister cornered me in the kitchen. She wanted to know why I'd kept my success secret for so long, and why I'd chosen tonight to reveal it. I told her the truth, that I hadn't kept it secret, but that nobody had ever shown enough interest in my life to discover it. She tried to apologize for the comment about getting a real job, but we both knew the damage was done, not just from tonight, but from years of subtle dismissals and casual condescension. She'd built her identity around being the successful sibling, and finding out that her measure of success was incomplete had clearly shaken her. Update 1. The fallout from the party continued for weeks. My parents called me several times, wanting to understand why I'd never shared details about my financial situation. I explained that I'd tried to talk about my work before, but conversations always seemed to drift back to my sister's corporate achievements or someone else's traditional career path. My mother admitted that they'd been worried about me for years, thinking I was struggling financially and just too proud to ask for help. She said they'd been planning to offer me money for a career transition program or additional training. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd been preparing to rescue me from a situation that didn't exist. My sister and I barely spoke for about a month after the party. When we finally did talk, she seemed different, less confident, more questioning. She asked detailed questions about my business, how I'd built my client base, whether I was happy with freelancing versus traditional employment. During one of these conversations, she admitted that she'd been feeling trapped in her corporate role for a while. The promotion she'd been so excited about came with significantly more responsibility and stress, but only a modest salary increase. She'd been considering making a change, but had been afraid to leave the security of a traditional job. The colleague who'd given me his business card at the party reached out the following week. His company needed help with a major e-commerce overhaul, and after a few meetings, they offered me a 6-month contract that would add another $60,000 to my annual income. I accepted, which meant turning down 3 other potential clients. My parents started bragging about my business to their friends, which was both gratifying and slightly irritating. The same people who had been subtly suggesting I needed to get my act together were now asking their own kids why they couldn't be more entrepreneurial like me. Update 2. 3 months later, my sister made a decision that surprised everyone. She gave notice at her corporate job and started her own marketing consultancy. She'd been watching my approach to freelancing and decided she wanted more control over her career trajectory. She asked me for advice on setting up her business structure and finding her first clients. We had several long conversations about the challenges and benefits of self-employment. For the first time in years, we were talking as equals rather than as the successful sister and the disappointing brother. Her transition wasn't smooth initially. She'd gotten used to the steady paycheck and corporate benefits, and the irregular income of freelancing was stressful for her. She also had to learn how to market herself and manage client relationships without the backing of a large company. But she was good at what she did, and within 6 months, she'd built up a solid client base. She specialized in helping small businesses develop their brand identity and marketing strategies, which complemented my more technical web development work perfectly. We started referring clients to each other when projects fell outside our expertise areas. What had begun as a moment of family drama had evolved into a professional partnership that benefited both our businesses. My parents adjusted their perspective on success and career paths. They stopped asking when I was going to get a real job and started asking about my business growth plans and investment strategies. They seemed genuinely proud of what I'd built, though I sometimes wondered if their pride was more about the money than the work itself. Update 3. A year after the party, my family dynamic had completely changed. My sister and I had both found our footing as business owners, and our parents had learned to appreciate different definitions of success. The Cartier watch that had symbolized achievement that night now seemed like just another expensive accessory. My sister eventually admitted that she'd always felt pressure to follow a traditional path because she thought that's what would make our parents proud. She'd been working in jobs she didn't particularly enjoy because they looked impressive from the outside. My revelation at her party had forced her to examine whether she was living her own life or performing someone else's version of success. We collaborated on a few major projects together, combining her marketing expertise with my technical skills. Our complementary abilities made us a strong team, and we were able to take on larger clients than either of us could handle independently. The whole experience taught me something important about family dynamics and assumptions. For years, I'd accepted my role as the underachieving sibling partly because it was easier than challenging everyone's expectations. I'd let them dismiss my work because confronting their assumptions seemed like more effort than it was worth. But staying quiet about my success had created a false narrative that hurt everyone involved. My parents worried unnecessarily about my future, my sister felt pressure to be the only successful child, and I felt undervalued and ignored. The truth would have served all of us better from the beginning. Looking back, I don't regret the dramatic way the revelation unfolded. Sometimes people need to be shocked out of their assumptions before they can see what's actually in front of them. That party became the catalyst for honest conversations that should have happened years earlier. My sister still has her Cartier watch, and she still wears it to important meetings. But now it represents something different. Not the validation of being the family star, but a reminder of how much we don't know about the people closest to us. And sometimes, the quiet ones in the corner collecting trash bags are the ones who have been succeeding all along.